You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I'm Dustin and Tony is with me and we are here to discuss all of the service-related news from the past week, which would be, in fact, January 14th through the 20th. We have a pretty big discussion later on. We're going to talk all about the reveal of what Peacock is and what you can expect from the service, because that reveal happened last Thursday at an investor meeting held by NBC, which I watched the entire 2 hours. I feel like this is just a continuous thing where they keep having these massively long investor meetings to reveal these streaming services, and of course, I'm watching them. I'm going to discuss what I saw, what the highs and the lows were from the service itself. We're going to talk about that later, but in the meantime, we do have a couple of different news things to discuss because the TCAs have wrapped up now, and there was a number of things that have been announced during and as part of the TCAs. There's also some more content news related to Hulu and Apple TV, which we'll talk about later this week when we release our content episode. But right now, we're going to cover the other stuff, the stuff that pertains to the services itself. And first up, we have CBS All Access has announced that they've gained yet another 2 million subscribers over the past 12 months. That puts them at, we estimate, about 10 million subscribers at this point, specifically because they said last February that they were at 8 million, add to 10 million. That's what you would assume they're at. However, it could be a little bit higher because they also said that they're still on track to get to 25 million subscribers by 2022, which is odd because that means they'd have to get 15 million more subscribers within the next 2 years. And that's not undoable by any means. Obviously, we've seen Disney, ramp up a lot and get a lot of subscribers right out the gate. CBS All Access, however, there's going to have to be something that's going to prompt them to get that million subscribers in such a short amount of time if they only got 2 million in the last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great growth. It's just at the same time, yeah, like you said, I mean, that's a little bit of multiplicative growth that is, it's going to be hard to reach. But I think the only way to reach it is through great, content. And I don't know about you, but I saw the newest trailer for that Picard series and man, does it look good. And I don't even like Star Trek. And so I think that if they focus on the good content with their backlog library and just slowly and surely hit at its numbers, I think that's the only way they can grow. I think it's aggressive growth, but I think there is like realistic growth for your business. And then I think that there's some things that you just say to make Wall Street happy. And they usually always overestimate growth. It just seems like they tend to overestimate what's actually going to happen and kind of predict from there. I mean, right now, the economy is doing well, especially the United States. And so, I mean, there's a little bit of concerns, but for the most part, it's doing well, and people have that disposable cash to, get these streaming services. And so, like, as long as, people have the disposable cash, and as long as you kind of create good content, you can dream a little bit big. And I think CBS is dreaming big. I think that they are going to grow. I think they're going to grow a lot. I think they're going to become a pretty decently, sized player. But at the same time, that's some big growth to kind of hit. So, I'm just a little bit worried. I think that for them to definitely get to the next step, they already have partnerships and they already, integrate themselves with, the NFL and, NCAA in streaming sports. But, I think that if they even more so focus on getting sports content and even more sports rights through their partnerships, and then if they add Paramount, I think that's kind of the only way that they can hit those aggressive numbers. I think that they're going to come underneath those numbers by that time. But I don't think they're going to be closer to hitting that mark than not hitting that mark, if you know what I mean.
I mean, honestly, the thing that concerns me is that the fact that they said that they still believe that they're on an incredible growth path and they're still on target to reach 25 million subscribers from CBS All Access and Showtime by 2022. But I just don't see how they're seeing that if they're saying, hey, in the last year, we've added 2 million subscribers. We have 2 years left, but we're definitely going to hit that goal of 25 million. It's questionable, and we'll have to wait and see. Maybe they've got got something up their sleeves that nobody's seen at this point. All right, next up, Oscar nominations have not been announced. The headline here is that Netflix actually had the highest number of Oscar nominations out of all the distributors, and they ended up having 24 compared to 15 in 2019. Not a whole lot of surprises here. Honestly, this deals more with what we enjoy, but Joker was the film that had the most nominations of all films.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
All right, so the next thing is, while we've been constantly following this, the NFL Sunday Ticket, there's some new rumors that look like YouTube TV could be potentially interested, or at least taking over or potentially interested in the NFL Sunday Ticket. I don't want to get onto the rumor part of it, because honestly, the rumor part is far stretched by itself. More of the fact that it clearly is extremely clear at this point that there is a lot of, we wouldn't be hearing as much talk about the NFL Sunday Ticket leaving DirecTV and going somewhere else if it wasn't for the fact that it was actually happening, because there's been a lot of talk about this. So it's just something that we just need to keep an eye on for now, and we'll keep bringing up as we hear more and more things. We've heard other places that are potentially interested, and we've talked about some of that, but YouTube TV is not somebody that we were even thinking about at the time, if only for the fact that it's outside the realm of one of these streaming services, which is what we've been assuming. With the big talk that we've talked about in the past was Amazon and Prime Video potentially being a big player for this, because they have a service, but one of these other streaming services that are focused more on the live TV element, like YouTube TV or Fubo TV or even Hulu Live TV, one of those wasn't even a player that we were thinking about at the time. So it is something just to consider, that it does go outside the realm of just the main streaming services that we're constantly talking about.
I think the most important part of this article isn't so much YouTube TV. I mean, I think that there is some truth in rumors, and I think that, obviously I believe that they're going to, shop around NFL Sunday Ticket. YouTube TV, why them, I guess. But if they're looking to, ship off the NFL Sunday Ticket to the highest bidder, this is, I think, once again, just good for the next stage of growth. It's going to have to be, you have to do something new, right? We're talking about original content. That's great, the backlog, but you're going to need other type event-based content that's going to draw in people, and especially for a long time. And, getting the NFL 16 game regular season games plus, the playoffs and, sports, I think is going to be the next step, and it's going to be the next rush for the bigger players. For the niche players, I don't necessarily know, but for the bigger players, that's going to be a big grab. And I think it's interesting how, the NFL is looking back at the situation, and okay, like if it is a good idea, then they can basically auction off the rights to NFL Sunday Ticket and, other, potential NFL, content that they want to create. Essentially, like, have an auction for the NFL rights, streaming rights in some, form. But, give that an auction to the highest bidder and see where that goes. And that's what I'm interested in, because it's okay. Like, if you get the Premier League, like, then you get NFL, then what about the NBA? What about golf? What about baseball, MLB, and stuff like that? So that's, to me, the interesting part is a future of sports rights in the streaming age. To me, that's the interesting part about this article.
All right, so next up from the TCAs, Amazon Studios was there, and they had some interesting comments regarding their competition when it comes to Disney Plus or Apple TV Plus or Netflix or HBO or Peacock. They said that they are in a different world, and they said, we're in a different model because unlike the pure streaming video on-demand players, we are looking for Amazon Prime customers, making sure we're delivering value. That's what we're looking for, our content to drive subscriptions. We don't have to play as a substitute for a different type of service or compete in that way. Basically, translated, the gist of this is that Prime Video is creating content that they can specifically keep their Prime customers from the churn. Constantly hear about the services having to create more and more content to reduce the churn rate that they have as far as subscribers subscribing specifically for one show. This comes up with Netflix all the time. You get the big shows like Stranger Things. People subscribe to Stranger Things, but then they leave after they've watched it because there's nothing else that they want to see. Not that the Netflix isn't producing an insane amount of content, but that's the game that Netflix is currently playing, is that they are releasing an insane amount of content to ensure that people are not leaving the service and unsubscribing from Netflix. Prime, however, is saying that they're not in that business of creating content to ensure that people subscribe to the service. They're creating content to add value to the overall Prime subscription as a whole, meaning the subscription that allows you to get the free shipping and the faster shipping and a variety of other Prime benefits that you have from subscribing to Amazon Prime. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking to compete in the sense of making sure that there's an insane amount of content nonstop like Netflix is doing, because Netflix is just streaming video. Amazon Prime as a whole is much larger than just Prime Video. So while they're focusing on creating content, they're focusing more on the lines of creating quality content that will drive people to continue to subscribe to Amazon Prime as a whole, rather than just subscribing to Prime Video like they are with Netflix and using it as a substitute service. All right, so then a couple of new deals have been reached. First up, STX Films and Amazon Prime has struck a major European output deal, meaning that all STX films will be appearing on Prime Video when it comes within the area of Europe.
Who is STX Films? I mean, before today, I didn't know who they are.
They're a distributor of films. They create films. Most recently, some of the films that they're best known for would be Hustlers or I Feel Pretty, which was Amy Schumer film. They make a variety of different films, but they are not considered. Most of the films that they make are not blockbusters by any means. They're a newer player in the sense of they're not as big as obviously like Sony or Universal, Warner Brothers, Disney. They're nowhere near the size of them, but they do have mid-budget, star-driven movies that people seek and are sought after. Hustlers was their biggest film recently, which was made on a very, very small budget and ended up making a lot of money here domestically.
You answered why STX was important and why this thing, because I don't know if everyone knows about STX. I mean, I didn't know until preparing for the show about who they were.
I mean, it's the film stuff, but they also create stuff for television as well. Nothing that's been like super successful or very big, but they do have some things that they've produced for television as well. So that's that deal. The other deal that's worth noting is that Netflix and Sky has inked a new multi-year deal to continue to make Netflix content available to Sky subscribers. Now, that's not to say that you get it for free, like some of these other content deals that we've heard of. This is more in the line of Sky, like Comcast, is a cable provider in Europe, and they basically will have the Netflix app pre-installed onto their DVRs, which means when you search for a show, Netflix content will pop up, and if you have a subscription to Netflix, you can view it directly through the cable box. We talked about how important this is for achieving the ability to watch Netflix on these devices that the older generation already has, and it creates less of an issue with them having to go find new technology to be actually watch the content that is available. So that's that one. Then Netflix also announced that they have opened up a massive office in Paris, and they're looking to create some new partnerships and have a huge slate of new content that is coming from the French market as well. This isn't that big of a surprise. It just, again, cements the fact that Netflix understands that the international market is very big. France is best known for having a very upscale film market, so Netflix is clearly trying to court the French market and say, look, we can try to we can produce content that is very high quality too, and can live up to the standards that you guys expect as the French society. So that's the other deal that was announced in the last week as well. So jumping over to there are two discussion points. The first one is HBO Max execs, again, were at TCAs, and they talked about a variety of different things. Some of the highlights of what they've talked about, which will specifically stick to the stuff that has to do with the streaming services and things like that. But talking about the name, they specifically said the reason why they ended up going with the HBO Max name and not something like the WB or Warner Brothers was they felt like the Warner Brothers name by itself was not a well-recognized brand by itself, like Disney, to be an entire umbrella company for the other sub-brands. And while HBO Max, the HBO name is related to premium content, the price, however, is the concern. And they said they're not as worried about people being concerned about the price of the service as they are about the fact that the HBO brand is very well known for creating quality content. And they don't want to dilute that in any way. They also said that Cinemark content is very unlikely to be brought over to HBO Max Max, even though Cinemark will no longer be creating original content on them by themselves. They talked about the Audience Network, which was a network that AT&T owned before the Warner Media deal went through and before they became all in one company. The Audience Network has a couple of shows, they just have a very select group of original shows for their network. Mr. Mercedes is one of them that's probably the best known one, and Loudermilk. Those shows were originally renewed, and now they don't have a home because they're actually shutting down the Audience Network and turning it into an HBO Max preview channel, and that's what will be happening in the future with that.
Why aren't they folding in Cinemark content?
It does seem natural that would make sense. They just said they don't have any plans to bring all of the Cinemark content over. Cinemark has its fair share of original shows, but to be honest, there's not a ton. And I think the issue is that because they're sticking to their curated necessity of what they're putting on the service, having a Cinemark, we saw the interface and then we saw the boxes, and the boxes dealt with different brands, and they had TBS and TNT and DC Universe, Sesame Street, and you click on those boxes and you see the content. I don't think that Cinemark has any shows that are extremely well known to the general audience to warrant a box for Cinemark, and I think that's the main issue. I think the other problem is that, or Cinemark, I keep saying Cinemark. Cinemax is best known also in some circles as Skinemax, and the idea of them having adult content at late in the evenings and things like that. I don't think that they want that brand necessarily associated with HBO Max. Is my guess. It's that, and the fact that there's not a ton of original content that they can bring over to leave it as a brand and say, like, okay, Cinemark, this is the content we have. And I think that's the main reasons as to why Cinemax is not having all of their content come over to HBO Max.
Well, I mean, you can just put it on a other channel or just other content.
I don't disagree.
I guess my thing with HBO Max is just the fragmentation of the company, and just I get that they want human curated, and that just sounds cool. But I mean, you know what they're gonna do is, instead of having some AI prediction, they're just gonna have a person just crunch numbers themselves. I mean, it's just gonna be basic statistics, and I don't understand that whole point of view. I mean, yeah, people are gonna have a choice, but that's what's gonna happen, and I don't understand why they have such a fragmentation in their library and why they just don't bring it all together. And I get that they want these brands and these channels, and that's fine for the big players. It just, more content's good. Why do you need to have this content looming around somewhere else? Because it's just not hard to just surface that on the app. Not many people will use it, but just surface it. You don't know what's going to happen. And that to me is the most annoying part, is just the fragmentation of, Warner Brothers, AT&T, HBO Max. This design for them is, I don't mind the price, $15. I don't mind these channels or the human curated, whatever that means, part. It's the fragmentation of all these different businesses, because for me, it just doesn't logically make sense why you would separate all these different parts out of this part here and this part here and this part here. To me, it's nonsensical in my opinion. But I mean, I get that that's what they're going to do. Do you feel the same way? Just frustrated at the fragmentation of all this?
So I am frustrated by it, but I have a better understanding. I can probably explain this just a tad bit better than I probably have. So outside of the fact of the Cinemax thing, I'm going to get away from that for a moment. I'm just going to talk about the fragmentation of the entire company that is Warner Media, because there's a lot of it. So here's the problem. When you come to the streaming services, you've got specific content. And I think, as we've talked about in the past, Warner Media as a company has been best known for licensing content elsewhere. They create content, they distribute the content, but they will, in most cases, license the content to other networks, other services, and create content. We've talked about how Paramount and, to a degree, CBS and Viacom, all now as one company, Paramount by themselves has been creating a massive amount of content for a variety of different networks and services. They create shows for Amazon, Netflix. This is something that is a part of their main core of their business, is creating this content for businesses, for other services or networks or channels in general. Warner is even bigger than that. They've been creating content for practically every broadcast station that is currently on the air. They create content for a number of other cable channels that are not their own cable channels. They create shows for their own cable channels. They create shows for practically every streaming service out there outside of like Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus. They create content at Netflix. The problem is that in order to jump 100%, and I've complained about this, but I have a better understanding of this now based off of an article that we're actually going to talk about in relation to Peacock in a minute here. The idea of trying to transition from the amount of money that you're getting per customer on average from producing content elsewhere to having it just come from the streaming service, it's a big difference.
See, no, I get that part under the brands that they own, right? And that point of view, like the companies that they own, I get it's hard to bring in stuff that's licensed out to other places, right? But of the stuff of the companies that they own and the content that's made by them, why don't they just bring that into HBO Max and fold those companies into, this bigger version of as a whole, the stuff that they own? Like, why don't they bring that in?
So the simplest answer, going back to Cinemax, is, for example, Cinemax creates content for a premium channel that's packaged with HBO, generally with cable companies. By taking all of that content and making it available on HBO Max and no longer creating original content for Cinemax, there's no incentive for cable companies to package Cinemax with anything. And then the entire idea of what Cinemax is and the content that they can offer to cable companies by offering it as part of a package, it becomes useless. There's nothing there anymore for them to do because you're not going to subscribe to Cinemax on a cable, as part of a cable package, or look at that as a benefit if you get all of that content on HBO Max. So that's the issue that I think the distinct problem with bringing all of the content directly over to HBO Max, outside of the things I mentioned earlier, is that it basically makes the channel pointless, and it is no longer a real premium channel that cable companies can actually use as an incentive to make their packages better. And I think that's part of the problem. The other thing is, like, when you look at some of the other content that you have, I understand what you're saying. Like, why don't you just bring all this stuff in? Peacock just announced their lineup of a bunch of content, and there was a couple of shows that they have licensed from Warner Media that are going to appear there. And I think the thing is, HBO Max is walking the line of, how much content do we really need to have? How much content can really be successful on their service? Their numbers of, like they've said, about 10,000 hours of content will be available on HBO Max when it launches. And obviously that number will grow over time. But the thing is, they have probably 50,000 hours of content within the entire Warner Media brand. I think their concern is that if they have all this content there, they could be licensing it elsewhere. They could be getting money for it, while some of that content isn't going to be, its best use isn't on the service. So I think the problem is that they're trying to juggle a lot of different business models, and HBO Max, what a lot of people assumed was going to be the go-to for all the Warner Media stuff, like Disney's doing, like CBS All Access, and Paramount will eventually be like NBCUniversal is doing with Peacock. They can't do that because they have to figure out a way of like juggling this to make it the most sense and to not just basically hold all their cards on the one table like Disney does. Because let's be real, Disney has done that for a long time and have held the chips for a long time. That deal that they did with Netflix was a big deal, but ultimately, as long as they make back that money that they had for that one deal, they're fine. Disney isn't like licensing a ton of content all over the place like some of these other companies like Paramount or Warner Media is. So I think that's what it's coming down to, is the fact that ultimately there's just not a lot of options for them to jump all in all right away.
I guess my thing is like, it might not add a net benefit, but there's no net negative. You know what I mean?
Oh, I see that, and I agree full-heartedly with that. If there's no negative, then why not do it? And I agree with that, and I think that ultimately it comes down to the same argument that I've had about, well, the shows that they have on DC Universe or Boomerang, why not just fold those into the service and allow those other services to either be less expensive because you're offering the same content, and then people who can't afford a $15 service will subscribe to the $4 a month service like Boomerang that just has cartoons.
Yeah, no, I understand that. As a soft intro, I think there's an interesting point about the article article discussing how they're going to strategize with DC Universe and some of these other shows that they've already created, and how they're discussing how that all that is. Kevin Riley discussed a little bit in that interview of how they might look at that, and how with the DCU originals, they might air a day early on that platform before dropping to HBO Max. And so it's I think they're trying to toe the line between the two of how that works. But once again, I guess you can't half-ass two things. You can't be in both business models and do them well. As well as they could be. And I guess my thing is, it's going to be so expensive to have two infrastructure set up. Doing the same thing twice, it's just not cost effective. It's not logical. And trying to come up with a strategy to appease the DCU people and the HBO Max people by letting one release a day earlier than the other. I mean, how much of a benefit is that? Seriously, how much of a benefit it is to get Titans one day earlier on DCU and then get it a day later on HBO Max?
It's not about the idea of what's a benefit. It's they don't want to hurt their existing subscriber base that's not paying $15.
Grandfather them in.
Yeah, well, there's a problem with grandfathering somebody who's paying $8 a month to somebody who's paying $15 a month. There's no way they're going to do that.
Just think of it as a trial basis. I get that $8 a month and $15 a month. You're essentially losing half the value, but just roll them in, and the next time that they have to redo it, just they grandfather them for where they are now. They don't pay anymore, but when that subscription ends in a year, then have them re-up at the $15 price, and you get all of HBO Max. But right now, just grandfather them in at that price. Right? They're so worried about losing people, then just grandfather them in until the next time that they re-up.
We'll have to wait and see what happens. I think the problem is that ultimately they've got so many different things that need to get consolidated, and it's only a matter of time. I honestly think that what's going to end up happening is DC Universe by itself is probably going to live on, but it's going to dramatically, and it already kind of is there, it's going to dramatically shift from the focus of original content over to the focus of the comics and the community, which is what they've been doing for the last roughly about a year, because they added the massive back catalog of comics available on the service, and that was just about a year ago. And I think that they're transitioning to focusing more on that, and I think the content is going to be second hand, and I think a lot of the content is going to eventually move over to HBO Max, and it'll be there, and the content will still be there on DC Universe, but it'll allow the service to kind of lower its price point and offer something, that people want as far as the comics, because there is an audience that wants just the comics and doesn't really care about the originals as much. But then it also can allow them to have the services work alongside each other without really disrupting the service. You're not going to roll DC Universe into HBO Max and keep the comics part of it for HBO Max. It doesn't make sense for the model of what they're trying to accomplish with HBO Max. But you can't have the service by itself just be comics, because that's not what the service was originally, and that would hinder the amount of people that are actually using it. Now, I can honestly tell you that I'm not sure there would be a lot of people who would be that concerned about seeing something the next day. I really don't. Honestly, the DC Universe original show Stargirl is going to be premiering on the app. The next day it'll be on CW. And nobody's really raising any complaints about that, but that was how they ended up having to do it in order to make sure that they could warrant the cost of the show. And I think that's what's going to end up happening with a lot of the other shows. They've got the Harley Quinn series, which has not been announced that it's been renewed for a second season yet, but it has gotten decent reviews. Titans is getting a season 3. Titans could easily shift over. It's, they'll run into issues when they do the international rollout, because Titans is one of the shows that has an international licensing deal with Netflix. But outside of Titans, none of the other shows have that same deal. So I don't think that it's going to be that hard to do that. And it will be a matter of time. The other part of it is HBO Max has to also have some things that they can roll into the service later on to expand the amount of stuff. We know over time there's going to be content that will become available that they will want to have on the service. The perfect example, the other part in this article is talking about the Harry Potter stuff. All the Harry Potter films, the Fantastic Beasts, all those films are locked up in a deal over at NBCUniversal. And while there are some articles online that portray that as Warner Brothers is super pissed about the idea that their content's locked up over there, that's not true at all. They're not pissed off about that. It was a lucrative deal for Warner Brothers, And it's a massively big deal because they have the Harry Potter stuff in the Universal Parks, which brings an entirely large amount of merchandising revenue into Warner Media. So the reality of it is, yeah, sure, would they like to have everything they own on the service? You bet they would. But they also acknowledge that they have to gradually transition, and while the early days of HBO Max are going to be a huge transitional thing, just like any service. I mean, like you look at DC Universe and the opening 6 months of that service compared to what it is now is vastly different. I mean, they've got to slowly and gradually transition over to the new version of what they're doing, and that's what I think HBO Max is. That's why the AVOD element, the ad-supported subscription plan that they have planned for 2021 for HBO Max, that's going to lower the price point significantly, probably I'm guessing to about $10 per month. And if that's the case, it opens up the door for people who don't want to pay that $15, but also gets the people who are, maybe paying only $5 for Boomerang or $4 for Boomerang per month to jump up because they get a lot more content, or the people who are using, subscribing to DC Universe for the original shows and as it has the comics for a benefit, pay an extra $2 per month and they get all this extra content. I think that's what's going to end up happening. It's just right now it's a transitional situation because their business model as a company is been so ingrained in the idea of licensing content everywhere. They're trying to now figure out, well, how do we get this content to be back where it needs to be without losing a significant amount of money in a short period of time.
All right, so Peacock news. So since you watched the investor part, the investor, I'm going to play the audience part. I don't have the luxury like you do and the patience to watch all these investor things. So what were your, initial, thoughts about this, the reveal and the investor summit?
I talked about this last episode because we recorded it right before. My predictions were there was going to be 3 different tiers. They were going to have a variety of different content, and the only thing I wasn't sure on was the price points. And basically, Peacock is going to roll out and have 3 tiers. One is going to be a completely ad-supported tier, the bottom tier, which would be free. You can watch it whenever you want. There will be ads interspaced in between. It'll actually have the ability to watch live television as well but it'll be ad supported. So it's basically like broadcasting the stuff that you'll be able to see on their channels as is, with ads intertwined with the content itself. They will have a $5 tier, which will be also ad supported, but it will allow you to have about 15,000 hours of content available on demand whenever you want. So that means you'll be able to watch shows like The Office or Parks and Rec. You'll be able to watch those, but with ads, but you'll be able to access all that content. Then they'll also have a $10 tier, which will be completely ad free. And other than it being ad free, there's nothing additional that you'll get. It just gets rid of the ads completely. So it's very similar.
So what's the plus on the bottom? On the I get the middle, the $5 and $10 tiers, like that makes sense to me. But what are we actually getting for that $5? For that free tier?
So the free tier,
if we don't get the backlog, like what are we getting for that free tier?
So the free tier, there is some content that you'll get. They said there's about 7,500 hours worth of content that will be available on that free tier, and it's still on demand and things like that. The difference is you just don't get as much content, and you won't get any of the original series, but you'll get a variety of content. Just it's limited on how much content you'll actually get. So you'll be able to watch the live stuff. You'll be able to watch basically half of the on-demand content that they have, no premium original shows that they have, and that's what you would get for free. If you want the original content and you want the extra, you basically double the amount of content that you get, you'd have to pay $5 per month. The other catch, of course, is that if you are a Comcast cable subscriber or a Comcast internet subscriber, you will be able to get the $5 tier for free because it will be worked into your Comcast subscription. You don't have to pay anything for it. As a Comcast subscriber, you will get the $5 ad tier for free. Or you can pay $5 and get the premium top tier ad-free version for free as well. So that's the catch. The other part is, while they've been touting for quite some time that they would be launching in April, turns out that was only part of the truth, which is they're launching in April exclusively for Comcast subscribers. So if you are a Comcast subscriber, you'll be able to get Peacock right away, but it'll only be the on-demand stuff. None of the original stuff is launching until after the Olympics in the summer. The new shows that they've been talking about, like the new Saved by the Bell or the Punky Brewster, these different shows that have popped up in our content news discussions, none of those shows are going to be available until well after the Olympics, because they're really launching nationwide the week before the Olympics, and they're going to use the Olympics as basically their launching point for a lot of content and showcasing a lot of the stuff that you'd see elsewhere. But then they'll also have exclusive shows, like a different wrap-up Olympic shows initially when they launch. So April 15th is the launch date if you're a Comcast subscriber, which will allow you to see the on-demand library. The launch date will be for the national rollout will actually be July 15th. So when I told you this, you were like, oh, so it's basically like a beta launch. And I was like, yeah, pretty much, because it comes across as it's coming out 3 months earlier for everybody else, or for the Comcast subscribers, but there's no original content. Nobody is going to be paying for the service initially when it first launches, but I guess it gets some people to talk about it, get people hyped about it, and prompts them to potentially subscribe come July.
Are you happy with the offerings? Like in comparison to its rivals, $10 for a premium tier with no ads, I think it's in middle of the road of, if you're going to do an average, I think it's definitely middle. It's going to be about the same as Amazon Prime. I know like a Prime subscription is like $100 a year, and so if you wanted to just focus just solely on the Prime Video part, I think it's a safe equation to say it's like $10 per month if you want to look at it. So $10 per month for getting all the CBS content, all access, commercial free. How do you feel about that price point? Are you happy, sad? Do you have an opinion on it?
Honestly, I don't think it's a bad price. It is middle of the range. It's obviously not as expensive as HBO Max or the top tier Netflix. But the catch, of course, is that there was a lot of details that they didn't say. They didn't say whether or not the content was going to be available in 4K at any of the tiers. They didn't say how many consecutive streams you can have at the same time, or concurrent streams.
Is there ever element on like the 4K part?
Well,
does Netflix have a limit on like the 4K part? I'm just trying to think of a service where like...
Well, Netflix only allows the 4K or Ultra HD at the top tier. You don't even get it as an option on the bottom two tiers. The standard.
Are there any other services that deal with that 4K or Ultra HD part? Are there any other services that limit by picture quality of HD? And
Netflix is the only one that I'm aware of. I know for a fact that Disney Plus made a big deal about how 4K was going to be included with the normal subscription, because they were specifically calling out Netflix for separating the video quality between the tiers. I know Prime Video doesn't have tiers, and theirs is all, if it's available in 4K, you'll see it in 4K if you can. So I'm trying to think of any other services that do that, and it's really just Netflix that I'm aware of. But the other thing, of course, is that when you compare it to HBO or you compare it to Disney, they only have one tier at this point. There's not multiple tiers. So that's the catch, of course, is Netflix has multiple tiers. The other services don't, so they can charge more for other things. Obviously, the 4K or the Ultra HD is only one aspect of that tier. The other part of the tier that's more important to a lot of people is the amount of users you can use at a time. The top tier Netflix tier, you can use up to, I believe, 5 at a time, while the other services like Disney has, I think, 4 concurrent streams at a time. I don't think they've revealed, HBO hasn't revealed theirs. So it's not so much about, to me, it's not like, I just want to know the nitty gritty so I can compare it to the other services. I don't know about concurrent streams, if that'll even be available on Peacock. I don't know about whether or not the stuff will be available in 4K, because that wasn't discussed. So it's more of a, okay, so how do you compare it directly to something like Netflix? Is it as good? You can get a total number of hours of content, which they said is 15,000, which will put them higher than what HBO Max is offering, which is amusing because HBO and Warner Media has a much larger catalog of content, as we were just discussing. So they're going to have more content than a service like HBO Max, which is going to cost more money. but what else will you get as, what are the technical specifications of, they didn't even really focus, honestly, on the premium tier or say that it's going to be anything other than just ad free, which is smart because obviously they're trying to promote the ad version of what they're doing because that's where they're going to make a lot of money because they've got the advertisers who are already interested in the service. They're also predicting between 30 million to 35 million active users by 2024, which puts them slightly below what HBO Max is doing, but they're also starting from the ground up because HBO Max at least has that 30 million current subscribers that they already have. They just have to basically gain an additional 20 million subscribers. Peacock basically has to start the ground up. So comparably speaking, the best thing I could compare this to is it feels like it is CBS All Access. Well, the price points are different depending on the tiers, but of course the biggest difference is that CBS All Access doesn't have the free tier, which allows just ad supported. So that's of course the difference. The other part of this is that if you've got a service like Peacock, which has a large amount of content available for free, what does that do to other services that don't have as much content, and where does that leave them? You look at Apple TV Plus, well, they're only charging $5 a month, and it's ad-free. If you offer something that's completely free, what are most people going to choose? Are they going to choose the free option with ads, or are they going to choose the $5 option that doesn't have nearly as much content? You look at Quibi, who's getting off the ground and starting up. They're charging $5 per month, and they don't have a free version. And you've got this other service that is going to have a free version. So it leaves some other of these other streaming players in question of, well, how do they continue to compete when there's somebody who's offering maybe not an unlimited amount of content by any means, but how are they going to be competing with somebody who has the ability to sell ads, has the ability to have a service that's supported by ads only? And it leaves Quibi in a unique position, in my opinion.
Do we know anything about, so Quibi, who learned a long time ago that they've pretty much, sold out their ad space very quickly. Did we learn anything about, any advertising, information out there that we know about? So that we learned? Yeah, so they did announce that they have a couple of launch sponsors. Some of them are Unilever, Target, and State Farm. But they do have, they said that those companies that are just the launch sponsors are going to break in hundreds of millions of dollars of initial advertising revenue. And I honestly think that the way their advertising is going to work is more in line with what YouTube is. The way they described it during the investor meeting is that the ads that they supply will be more geared towards the user, like you will see on YouTube, because they use that as an example. But they also stated that because that's the other reason why if you offer the free version, they'll still get that data that they desperately want in order to make the ads worth more money by being able to do more personalized ads to the people who are watching the ads. So if they have a free version, somebody signs up for an account, you watch ads, they'll see what type of content you're watching. They can sell that information directly to the advertisers, who then can create content to better market their stuff to you as the viewer of that content. So I think that they're not limited in any way like Quibi is. Quibi has a very, very set in stone amount of advertising space that they can sell because of the way they are doing their ad blocks. And their ad blocks are basically, you're an advertiser, you're buying a block for X show, that ad will be there for that X show. The problem is that long term, I'm not sure that and we've talked about this. I think we just talked about this last week. The issue with that is that it doesn't that model doesn't work long term, because if you're building a library of content, people will go back and watch that content. Will that advertisement still be relevant to that ad, a year later? I don't know that it will be. And I don't know, based off of everything that they've said and the fact that there's a set amount of ad blocks that they can sell, it certainly does not feel as if Quibi has anything but a specific ad for a specific show. And that is, for that episode, that's all it's going to be. So Peacock, however, based off of everything that I saw, it seems like they're more in the lines of, you're just buying an ad space. We're going to try to link up your ad with the person that makes the most sense. Very similar to how YouTube does it.
And honestly, that's the more profitable method because they can keep selling ad space regardless of whether it's old content, new content, live content, on-demand content. They can sell ad space all the time. That's how a lot of these other services like Hulu that has ads and CBS All Access, they have ads. They're not selling ad space for something specific. They're selling ad space for, their service as a whole. And that brings in way more money than a singular ad spot during a specific thing. It's like comparing, you see when you watch the Super Bowl here in the United States, you'll see these companies who will blow their entire advertising budget on one ad during the Super Bowl, but you'll never hear anything about the company at any other point during the year because that's where they spend their money because they're trying to get to that one spot. Quibi is essentially, at least the way I'm interpreting what they've done, they've set up their ad blocks to be you're sponsoring that, it's like you're a sponsor. It's like the 50s where shows would be sponsored specifically by a product. It feels like that's the case with Quibi because you're not going to see a ton of ads within a 10-minute video. You're going to see a very short amount of ads. So you're like essentially the sponsor of that, and that's why it's a set amount of money that they can spend or they can sell to an advertiser. So after I got done watching the investor meeting, I thought to myself, well, Peacock has this definitely figured out. They've seen some of the other services that have already launched. They've kind of seen what works, what doesn't. But really, Universal is in a unique position because they also have licensed a lot of their content elsewhere because they don't even have premium channel like, Warner Media has HBO or Viacom had Showtime. They don't have a premium channel even out there to have this content, to create additional content. They only have the blocks of programming that they have. So they have more ability to have more programming that they that they can produce and sell more ad space without really having to have a whole lot of infrastructure costs in addition to what they already have.
So just kind of like CBS All Access, will Peacock be offering any, sports related content? Because they do have a partnership with the NFL, although that's going to be kind of over in a few days because of the Super Bowl. But for the future, did they talk about any like sports, ideas?
Yeah, so they talked about the Olympics. That was their big focus, obviously, because the Olympics in general is big for NBC and all of its channels that they have. They have 3 daily Olympic shows that they're going to be having. They're also going to have they're going to be live streaming more than 1,000 hours of exclusive coverage from the Paralympics. They will have, after the Olympics are over, they'll have an Olympic channel, which will be like one of their live channels that you can just watch whenever you want, which will feature a ton of other content related to the Olympics. They'll have original content showcasing the athletes preparing for the 2022 Winter Olympics. They also stated that they'll have Premier League will have certain matches on the service as well. They said 140 matches that aren't available on television will be available on Peacock and over 2,000 hours of coverage. They also stated that the Ryder Cup, which is a golf tournament, will be available in September. So those are the things that they specifically announced, but I think that's because those are the things that they've got locked up immediately for the summer and early fall. NFL is going to be a question because obviously NBC has a deal with NFL to stream games, to air games on their broadcast channel. It'll be a question of whether or not those deals are locked up by the time the 2020 season begins for the NFL to know whether or not that's actually going to happen. But the only sports they talked about were Olympics, the Premier League, and golf.
From a super skeptic of Peacock, way back in the day, this investor meeting answered a lot of questions for me and made me, feel pretty well.
They also talked about how there's going to be a news element too, which a lot of people were not talking about ahead of time, which is that they're going to have live breaking news coverage available on the service, which is not something you're seeing a lot elsewhere. CBS All Access has a news element, but a lot of the other services don't. We know that HBO Max will have CNN content, but not necessarily live breaking news coverage like we would see if we were actually to watch CNN on a cable service. service. And then they also talked about the Universal films. The exclusive streaming rights for the Universal films will be available on Peacock, and that means basically it would be available for viewing on Peacock if it was made by Universal, which is a big deal because they were previously had a deal with FX that locked their movies into slots for an extended amount of time, and they've decided that they're no longer going to do that because obviously it's not in their best interest. FX is owned by Disney, and they're not making as much money as they could if they were offering a lot of their top tier films on their own service. So we'll talk more about some of the content announcements later in the week when we do our content episode, because there is a couple of different news shows that were announced. Yeah, I mean, there's a decent amount of content, and then obviously they've got The Office and Parks and Rec at the end of 2020, which they focused very, very heavily on the fact that The Office and Parks and Rec were going to be there, but of course they're not actually going to be there until the end of 2020, early 2021, when the Netflix deal runs out. So while they're promoting it, there's only a limit on how much content they can actually offer on the service. They can, however, offer clips, and one of the things that they focused on when they were showcasing the interface of the service is that when you go to a show, there will be these playlists where you can just watch clips of certain things, or basically like top 10 lists, things that you would typically find on YouTube produced by NBC or Universal. They'll have these things available on the service as well. So while you might not be able to watch The Office immediately when the service launches, you'll be able to watch these clips of like the top Jim pranks, Dwight moments, and things like that.
Gotcha. So any final thoughts on the Peacock Investor Summit? Anything that you look forward to, predictions, stuff like that?
Overall, it was actually probably one of the better investor showings that they've actually that any of these services have had. I thought the presentation was actually very well done. There wasn't a whole they did a good job of answering a lot of questions. By the end of it, when they did the quick Q&A at the end, which was about the last 15 minutes of the presentation, there wasn't honestly a lot of questions that were coming from the investors in the crowd that weren't answered or were very groundbreaking, while there was a bunch of comments coming from HBO Max. So I can honestly say they know what they're doing. They're very confident in what they're doing, and I think that it could be very successful. The big thing is that they're going to be selling the ad space, and that will help them raise money right away. So while HBO Max has to get over that hurdle of $15 per month, their service, however, is going to have some money coming in regardless, because they'll have the ad support version right away. So there's that, which is great for them. But I think that they can be very successful. I don't think their numbers are far-fetched as far as 30 to 35 million. I don't think they're too out there. I honestly think that if CBS All Access thinks that somehow they're going to get another 15 million subscribers in the next 2 years, then in 4 years, Peacock could easily get 30 to 35 million subscribers. I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility in any way. So they did a great job. I mean, to be fair, 3 tiers, and the way they explained it in some of the stuff, I was like, well, it just feels like they're trying to do everything they possibly can to make sure that they can get subscribers, even if they're free subscribers. But I think that they explained it in a way where it comes off as it's very well thought through, and it's a balanced way of making sure that it works for them and doesn't hurt any of their existing markets that they are currently making money in. However, when you compare it to somebody like HBO Max, it's not exactly the same service at all, other than it's a streaming service, you can see that they learned from the higher price point that could be a burden for gaining subscribers out the gate by making sure that they have these lower tiers compared to HBO Max, which is now focusing more on, we have a lot of content, original content that will be available on the service, and that should warrant the higher price point. I think it'll be interesting to see, because I think a lot of people are going to be comparing Peacock and HBO Max, even though they aren't exactly the same beast right now. But once HBO Max has their ad-supported version in 2021, it could become very similar, and then it's going to come down to, what does HBO Max offer for the higher price point compared to Peacock when you're doing it? Because if HBO Max's ad-supported version is $10, as I suspect it will be, compared to the $5 option that Peacock offers, for that extra $5, are you getting your value out of that extra $5 per month? because you're not going to be, like, as far as we know right now, there's no live news, there's no live sports, but NBC will be offering that. So can the amount of original content outweigh the fact that there isn't a news and a sports element, but it does cost more money? So I think that Peacock is in a unique position where they can be very successful.
Well, I mean, I'm happy about Peacock. As I said before, I think this investor summit really answered a lot of questions, and the articles, coming out of it describing, all the advancements and everything about it. So I feel a lot better about Peacock. I think I like that they're embracing ads. I like the $5 tier with getting the premium content, but also having the ad supported as well. I think that that's going to be manageable by people. I don't think that's going to be too burdensome to get those shows. I'm okay with the $10 tier as being its upper price point. I probably would. I don't know if I was them, I'd probably put it to 12. Although I like the 0, 5, and 10, just from a symmetry point of view. But I wouldn't mind if they bumped it up $2 more just to get that price for premium. I can see people paying 12. I wouldn't mind that from a business perspective, but from a obviously a user perspective, right? Lower is always better. So, but overall, I feel a lot better about Peacock, and nice to see that they have a direction for their future.
All right. So then, to just round out the discussion, there is an article that is in the show notes. It's from CNBC. It talks about why what number is so important when it comes to Peacock and why they're walking so lightly into streaming. And it actually is a little bit more of a look as to the reason. I talked about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about HBO Max, but it has it basically talks about why it's so important to these streaming services to not hedge their entire, hedge everything on the success of these streaming services, because some of these other companies, unlike Disney, are so linked into so many other businesses. Yeah, but basically the number that's most relevant is the ARPU, which is the average revenue per user. And you'll hear this in any investor conference or even some of the quarterly earnings reports and things. You'll always hear about ARPU when it comes to these streaming services. But the ultimate number that they're always paying attention to is how much revenue do you get per subscriber. And the reality of it is, when you look at something like Netflix, well, there's 3 tiers. What's the average amount that a subscriber is paying for their service? That's the ARPU. When it comes to ARPU for a service that offers ads, that number is more important, because that means how many ads are being watched and how much money are you making per user off of those ads, in addition to the subscription cost. HBO Max will look at ARPU, and as a bigger company, AT&T, and they talked about this, the ARPU for a user is higher when it comes to them offering as an incentive for their mobile plans or their cable plans and things like that, as an incentive to subscribe to these other things, because then their ARPU goes up. This article, which I definitely suggest you read if you're interested in a lot of the business side of this stuff, it explains why it's so important for these larger media companies that have been normally rooted in licensing their content elsewhere, creating content for their own cable channels, not to completely cannibalize their cable channels and their channels, or these other things, because in this specifically they talk about how the basic cable networks like CNBC, USA, Bravo, the ARPU that they actually bring in is on average about $6 to $7 right now. So that's fine, but when you factor in the sports and the live news and things like that, it actually can go up to $10 for the cable channels, which means the amount that they are bringing in through the streaming service is actually lower. So they have to figure out how to offset that by bringing in more users and selling more ads to bring that number up. So it's an interesting look. I found the article really interesting because I follow the business side of this stuff a lot, and why it makes the most sense, because I'm constantly asking myself, how does it make sense to choose which content to license, which content to keep, which content to even bring in that's not even your own, and why does it make the most sense? So definitely check out that article. So with that, it's going to be the end of this episode. This episode ran a little bit longer because we did have Peacock, and I didn't really want to do a separate episode just on Peacock by itself. So we appreciate you guys taking a listen, and also we did get a listener email asking us to talk about Studio Ghibli. We will talk about the new Netflix Studio Ghibli deal later in the week, because that is something that I want to discuss when we talk about our content. In addition to that, if you are so inclined, you can definitely send us an email at thestreamingwars@gmail.com with any topics you'd like us to discuss on a future episode. In addition to that, follow us on Twitter and join our Discord for all the latest articles that we talk about here on the podcast and some that we don't. You can also follow us on Instagram for all the latest announcements related to new episodes of the podcast releasing. You can listen to this podcast wherever podcasts are found, as well as YouTube and Pandora. So if you are looking for a specific link to those, you can find those over on the site. thestreamingwars.io is our website. Last thing, you can leave us reviews wherever you're listening to this podcast. That is always greatly appreciated, and to get the word out to other people that you may know that might be interested in the content we discuss here on this show. So with all of that being said, for Tony and myself, this has been the Streaming Wars, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.